Paperback Rocker, episode 97. Hey, this is Matt Severson, the Paperback Rocker, and I'm broadcasting from my 6x9-foot cinder block shack in the desert of northern Mexico, southern Texas. Welcome and thanks for checking out my show.
Today's topics of discussion will include British rock and terriers.
Hey everybody, what's up? It's your old friend Matt, the Paperback Rocker, and I'm back again with yet another episode of Ye Old Paperback Rocker podcast. And we are preparing momentarily to begin episode 41, volume 41 of the Blue Whiskey audiobook as read by the author, yours truly, Matt Severson, aka the Paperback Rocker. It's almost Christmas. It's time for you to think about buying books and CDs and things for your loved ones. Hopefully, they will be books and CDs and things written and performed by Ye Old Paperback Rocker. Drop me a line at paperbackrocker@live.com and I can hash out the details of that with you. Or you can order all my books on Amazon. Make sure and tell somebody about the podcast. Tell them about my album, Saturn Lander, self-titled album, which is on Spotify and other places like that. And my latest single called Gun in My Hand. This is a big week because I am going to get a new Scottish Terrier puppy next weekend named Young Black Betty. She will someday be Old Black Betty, I guess. And Lucy doesn't know what's going to happen to her world, but it should be interesting. And I'll keep you posted as things progress along those concerns. Okay, when we last read our hero, Stanton Wheelhouse III, had just performed what would be his third album, which has yet to be recorded, of course. He was performing it for the first time for Lord Brighton Rock and the engineer that has been assigned to take care of this album. And I believe his name is Jeff. So when we last read, our hero, Stanton Wheelhouse III, had just given a little performance of his third album in the rehearsal space in New York City for Lord Brighton Rock and Jeff. Okay, so we start here on page 226. Later that day, after a wonderful meal of scallops, oysters, and lobster, Lord Brighton, Jeff, and I were sitting in a linear saloon, not much different from the Thirsty Possum. It's a good business model for a saloon, and there are fine examples from Boston to Seattle and all points between. We were well lubricated and had gotten to know each other better. Lord Brighton wasn't bad when you got past his blustery facade, and he had a lot of good stories about pop stars behaving badly. All of us had changed from different to similar, which is what happens when people are thrown together in situations like ours. Lord Brighton and Jeff were enthusiastic in their assessment of what I had played for them, and it felt like we had the impetus of a competent team. At one point, Lord Brighton said, "Watch out for the labels, Stanton. It's us against them." He was quite intoxicated by this point, and his air of superiority was gone for the time being. "What do you mean?" I asked. "They want a single. That's all they care about. It's not about art. It's about one thing, the almighty pound." "Dollar," corrected Jeff. Where am I? Demanded Lord Brighton. His eyes seconded the question. New York, Lord Rock, said Jeff. Here with me, your engineer, and Stanton, the artist. You're a record producer. I am? Yes. Does this happen often, Jeff? I asked. He looked at me with a resigned look. Sometimes. The drunker we got that night, the more we talked about my album. We worked ourselves up until we all agreed it would be a #1 hit and propel us into glorious wealth and fame. We ended up back at the rehearsal space, stumbling blindly down the black corridors. The hallway's walls were heavily soundproofed, but the steel door to each rehearsal space was not. Each time we passed one, we were blasted by music different from the last door, the sonic equivalent of changing stations on the world's largest radio. Combined with the darkness and our drunken state, it was disorienting. We encountered people in the blackness. You holding? They asked. Give me something. One of them grabbed at us. And we rushed away, clutching each other so we wouldn't become separated. This went on for what seemed like hours until we were filthy and hopelessly lost on the 3rd floor. I saw the glow of a flashlight marching toward me, moving up and down with each step of the person holding it. Lord Brighton had collapsed, pleading like a wounded soldier on a battlefield for me not to leave him. Jeff had gone ahead as a volunteer scout. I hoped this person with the flashlight would help us before one of us succumbed to madness. The light came close and was pointed directly in my eyes, blinding me. Mr. Wheelhouse, that yous? Fabian? I asked thinly. Fabian laughed, or more accurately, guffawed, completely unaware of how dire our situation was. He got us up on our feet, and we used the torch to locate Jeff 30 paces ahead. Fabian delivered us all to the little room on the 4th floor. Fabian, what's your last name? I asked before he left. Kowalski. Polish, not Russian. And now you understand the mysterious liner notes of my 3rd album. The only person I thanked was Fabian Kowalski, the Polak who saved our lives. I stole Fabian from his job at the rehearsal building and employed him as the head of my security team for years until the punches he had taken as a boxer caught up with him like an Ali uppercut. When a fighter loses his marbles, it isn't called dementia. It's said that they're punch drunk. That passes as his professional medical diagnosis. His family expressed to me the desire for Fabian's privacy in this book. It's the Polish way, especially since Fabian was also Jewish. He was taken care of, that's all I can say. And that's not for my self-aggrandizement. It's so you'll know he was taken care of. Once again, thanks, Fabian Kowalski, for saving my life, and may you forever rest in peace. Rehearsals continued for 2 more weeks, which was extremely unnecessary and uneventful, except for one thing. Lord Brighton said the label wanted a hit, and he didn't hear one. He wasn't nasty about it. He loved my songs, but he wanted some ear candy like Simon and Garfunkel. I have never sounded like Simon or Garfunkel. Paul Simon is an amazing musician, but he's incredibly humble. I think that quality is directly correlated to his stature. He's only 5'3". If he was 6 feet tall, he'd probably have the biggest ego in the business. It's further proof that life works itself out. We all fall into our destiny. If we could all realize that, like Paul Simon does, we'd be a society free of envy. By that, I mean if people accepted their place in life, we'd be better for it. I'll give some examples. Take Einstein. There was surely a scientist in Einstein's realm who was almost as gifted as Einstein. Did that scientist accept his lesser role and support Einstein rather than envy him? I don't know. I'm not a scholar of Einstein. I guess that wasn't a good example. Maybe sport will provide a better one. On a basketball team, there is most always a player clearly better than the rest. Will the team be better if the other players fall into support roles to help the best player succeed? Of course it will. And if the second best player and third best and fourth best and fifth best accept their place in the scheme of things in the natural order of basketball, they will most likely play as a team and be very successful. Or they may lose, but they will lose as a team. I think that is a better example. Funny how what seems like yet another literary tangent I've drifted on is actually telling. Rehearsing in that miserable room with Lord Brighton and Jeff, I was building my own team, and we all needed to know our place, just like the players on that basketball team I was talking about. I had very little with which to influence their commitment to the project, since I wasn't paying them. Lord Brighton and Jeff were under contract for flat fees from the label. They would make the same whether my record was a flop or a smash. I hoped the pride they took in their work was sufficient enough to motivate them beyond what little money they were making. I had to trust them. It took 3 albums on Lucite for me to understand the economics of the music business before I returned to self-releasing my albums. It's all about points if you want everyone involved in a project to work as hard as they can to make it succeed. Let me explain. There are 100 points to be gathered and hoarded from an album's profit, like 100 little golden eggs. One egg can potentially make you rich and put your grandchildren's grandchildren through college. As I said, they're golden eggs. One golden egg from the royalties of Bridge Over Troubled Water means unfathomable wealth. Same for a point/egg of the Thriller album's profits. Hard to say which egg is more golden, but I think Paul Simon's got the edge, because Bridge Over Troubled Water is one of the most recorded songs of all time. Michael Jackson songs are rarely re-recorded. Today they call it having a skin in the game, which means having a stake in the success or failure of something. Possessing one or more of the golden eggs means having real skin in the game when you're talking about making records. Understanding of all this seeped into my brain slowly, like the tendrils of brown liquid from a tea bag emanate into a pan of water and eventually come to equilibrium. What could have been explained in minutes took years for me to grasp on my own, because it was in almost everybody's best interest to keep me in the dark about my own finances. It all boils down, continuing my tea theme, to the participants in the record-making process having a stake or skin in the album. Everyone in the music business understands that there's no such thing as equal skin in the game, and it's never fair. But it is what it is, as they say. Many times the artist has less skin in the game than his own manager and producer, who technically work for him. The only way out for the artist who finds himself in that sad position is to prove himself so valuable to the label that it will agree to give him more eggs on the next project. The best way to do that is to record a great album and promote the hell out of it and make the label a ton of money. As I mentioned, Lord Brighton and Jeff were being paid flat fees for their work on my album, and those fees were not particularly high. The label was holding something over Lord Brighton, but I never found out what that was. More than likely, he had borrowed money against his points on a record that flopped. Jeff was young and still trying to prove himself, so he had no leverage. I was making a half-dozen points on my album, but due to the unasked-for loans from the record company, I didn't make any money off my first Lucite album for decades. So none of us were making any money, really. It didn't matter much in the end. Our reputations were on the line, and sometimes that's more of a motivating factor than golden eggs, especially early in careers, like with me and Jeff, or when careers need to be salvaged, like with Lord Brighton. Back to that rehearsal room. I knew I had to get Lord Brighton and Jeff personally invested in the success of the album, despite my lack of business sense. I was flying on blind instinct. I think I'll go ahead and stop there. That is on page 231 of this beautiful hardback edition of Blue Whiskey. And that was volume 41 of the Blue Whiskey audiobook, as read by yours truly, Matt Severson. I hope you have a good week. I hope you're enjoying the story. And wish me luck with my new female terrier named Little Black Betty. I guess I'll see you next week or sometime soon with another episode of Ye Old Paperback Rocker Show. Have a great week. Thanks for being with me as always, and enjoy your life.
The Paperback Rocker has signed off.